welcome to Ladiescorner with Tea. A very special edition tonight as we talk about mental health with our expert Irene Kakai. And she joins us tonight to talk about internalized and systemic oppression, depression, anxiety, and how self-care enters into all of this. Hello, Irene. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, T. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. When we talk about stress and anxiety, and we've just all been through the American elections. What were your levels of anxiety through all that?
So mine actually. So let me first preface. You introduced me as an expert, and I really acknowledge and appreciate it. But I tend to hold back from being considered an expert, rather a long life engaged learner. So whatever I say comes from a long line of teachings and wisdom, and I hold this space as a continued engaged learner. But that being said, this week has been varied for me. For the most part, I've been off social media. It's one of my self-care practices to kind of tune out and back in whenever I feel I'm ready to. And so it was varied. I think the more I kind of plugged back into social media, the more I felt my sort of anxiety rising. But I have a very sort of healthy practice of sitting with uncertainty. So for me, I can empathize with other folks for whom this week was more intense than they had hoped an election season would be. Yeah, so it varied. I think it was yesterday, was it? It feels like today that we found out that Biden and Kamala won. But I think yesterday for me was definitely more. I felt more elation than nerves. So, and I'm sure I shared that with a lot of other people.
How significant do you think it is for a Black woman to be the first vice president of the United States of America? She's vice president-elect, of course.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge, not just for, and I was thinking about this yesterday. I thought about the idea of audacity. I came from a talk where earlier last week, I was at a talk, and audacity was one of the pieces, and her win kind of pinned that down for me. The idea that, it's that audacity to boldly show up and say, you know what, I can do something. I can do. It doesn't have to be becoming president, but it's that sort of consistent showing up. So I think for Black women across, I think I would say even across the world, it's a moment of reclamation, I would say, to really sort of dig into ourselves and think of the ways in which we have taken in the world, but at the same time, the ways in which someone like Kamala Harris, granted, she has privileges in sort of different pockets, but being who she is and who she represents, I'm sure has also, sort of created barriers in some ways, being a Black woman. And so it's a reminder, it's a reclamation, it's a rejoicing, right? We rejoice. We're aware of some of the politics that she comes from. And so Black women, I think, want to keep her accountable. Being in Canada, so being non-American, we get to watch from the outside. We've always watched from the outside looking in, but America being sort of this world stage, the dream that a lot of people, my biases are coming in for America, but the dream that a lot of people sort of subscribe to growing up. I think across the world, I think little Black girls get to have just another hero that they get to look up to.
Do you think it's possible to have a female leader, federally here in Canada? Do you see a Kamala Harris type scenario playing in this country? Just wondering.
Um, I do see it, but I think I see it differently. You know, we in Canada, I'm definitely no expert. You know, personal experience, sort of personal observations. But I think the racist struggles, the racist systems that we sort of grapple with, look different for us in Canada than they do in the States. And so I don't know if I'm in the position to speak to that extent. I think if I was involved in politics, maybe I would maybe have more confidence to sort of gauge the barriers that a Black person has in that space. I know that, and we know that there are barriers, but and there are barriers in our different sort of career spaces. And so I would say someone who is involved in politics would be able to speak to that more because they understand the extent of the challenges that they're facing, being different from what's going on in the States. So I don't want to take that question lightly.
Okay, absolutely. We're here to talk about internalized and systemic oppression, and I wanted to engage. What does this mean?
Mm-hmm. There, there are these I want to call them mountains of words. So I want to kind of break them up a little bit, starting with oppression itself. We know what oppression is. Oppression is, you know, prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. And I got this from Google, so I don't know. I don't know how legit that is, but I'm sure I want to trust that it is. So if we know that oppression is unjust treatment or control, then we know that systemic oppression is sort of written in system, written in the ways in the ways different maybe social institutional structures operate in and these can sometimes kind of go on for legacies and you know multiple generations before people kind of push back against it.
There's a problem sometimes with technology and internet. So it's either Irene's internet is wavering or mine internet is a bit shaky. But when we have Irene back, she will join us. Um, she will join us shortly. And so we have you watching, and the question is, how you feeling? Irene is here to do mental health, self care, and life has been really, really stressful lately, especially the 4 days I think it took. For those of us who live on Twitter, it's been really difficult coming to a resolution, and all that anxiety, leaves a toll. You're just tired and exhausted, and when it was announced yesterday that Biden and Kamala Harris were the projected winners, wow, wow, wow! Across America, people were celebrating. It was just a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And personally, I started to believe in the world again, in America again, and I felt so good, so good. Having said that, though, I'm just trying to hold the fort till Irene comes back. Um, Irene is going to share with us how to deal with exaggerated levels or extended levels of anxiety and stress. And on Tuesday, sharing your stories with Tayo and Nathan, she was talking about, let's talk about stress, and it is a big deal. It is. We live in a world where think something's always happening. We're always in a meltdown kind of situation. Um, so sometimes it's just good to be able to recondition our minds and to be able to calm down and to be able to walk through stresses, as it were. Irene is back. Hey, Irene.
Hello, hi. These
I
things
don't know
happen,
what
right?
happened.
They
How do
happen,
I-
they happen.
Okay, so you were talking about internalized systemic oppression. I just wonder, even talking just the big words, internalized and systemic oppression, your level of anxiety increases, and you're thinking, oh my God, is that
Mhm.
right or wrong?"
So systemic oppression and internalized oppression, for me, kind of go hand in hand. You can't have internalized oppression without systemic or overt, like outside oppression. And so oppression can look all sorts of different ways. It's intersectional, it's intertwined. There's race-based, there's gender, class, gender identity. So it looks completely different. And so as kids, we come into this world, and we learn a certain way of being. We learn a certain language of relating to the world, and that language tends to have oppressive ways to it. I'm not saying like the English. I'm just saying like the language of relating to others. And so you could be oppressive to someone who doesn't speak the dominant language. You could be oppressive to someone who is of a different class. So it varies. And so with systemic oppression, the way I see how it impacts internalized oppression is, say you've been, you know, you've experienced something overtly before. You've experienced maybe a particular name calling. Maybe you're a cis woman. You've experienced a particular name calling, and then going forward, you start to have a specific reaction to it. You start to have specific beliefs about it. So then that becomes internalized. So then it's the stories that you relate to your identity that then have an internalized sort of connotation to it. So they do go hand in hand. And you're right that when especially when you think about internalized, um, you're right that it can bring up anxiety. You can bring up mental health implications, because this is something we don't really talk about. When we talk about mental health, when we talk about the different mental health disorders, I personally to see, specifically within Canada, literature that talks about a lot of literature that talks about internalized mental health conditions in relation to internalized oppression.
Mm. So if I were to ask you, what would that look like within youth or within children? What would that present like um, when all these feelings have been internalized and they begin to be exhibited? What should we look out for?
Hmm. That is an interesting, fascinating research question. I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna write that and sort of look into it. Hmm. So I wanna start by saying, it varies. It varies by age. Um, so say, and I'm basing this information off of literature, not so much experience with youth that I've worked with. Um, but I want to say what's coming up to me is self-esteem, right? In so speaking specifically with regards to race, when we look at kids that maybe are not whose cultures who exist sort of in the dominant culture but are not of the dominant culture, it's possible that they can they can have self-esteem sort of I don't want to call it issues, but they can have self-esteem inconsistencies because they have one dominant culture that they're part of, and then another culture that they're supposed to be a part of, but maybe they're not. It's still unclear. So like all this information coming to them, and so it brings up a conversation about identity for them, their story. And so I think I would say what could be helpful in situations like this is the elders around
It looks like we're having problems with Irene's internet. We're going to take a little break now. Don't go away. We're really sorry about that. We got Irene back.
Yeah, it's one of those days, I guess.
We'll just do the final question then. What are maybe another time we can take a look at anxiety because we live in an anxiety filled world. But what I'd like us to consider, what are your self-care prompts? What do we do when we feel our inner temperature rising?
So for me, I highly recommend treating self-care almost like a part-time job if you can. Just because having whatever bucket of self-care things that you do, when you have that bucket and things start to kind of to build up in your space, in your experience, then you know that automatically, okay, I have a walk I can take. Okay, we're doing that. I have like someone I can call. Okay. But if you don't have that weekly bucket, if you don't I don't want to say plan because some of us don't like to plan, but I would recommend even planning it out, sprinkling little like self-care breadcrumbs so that in the week regardless of what's happening, you know that, oh, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to get my time to journal. I'm going to get my moment just to even if it's like staring out into space for 10 minutes, I'm going to get that. But I would say putting it into a schedule helps you sort of show up for yourself, because before anything else, before anyone else, it's first you.
Um, Thank you so much. All this is well and good if life is stable for you. But what happens really how do you self care when something suddenly happens? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, you go to your car for regular service and they tell you there's a waiting time, etc., and they don't have any waiting room for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you drop the car and think, I'm going to chill at Tim Hortons for maybe a couple of hours. Then they too are
Mm-hmm.
closed because of COVID. And then you know, how do you, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how do you amount or account for the sudden leaves that happen in our lives? Like, you're driving, we just had a trailer load, like ice dump
Mm-hmm.
on a trailer, like ice dump, literally, and your car skids and you fall off. That's like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you account mentally for those sudden things that you didn't plan for, or your tire busts, or you're right there in the middle of the hen day? It's
Mm-hmm.
to keep
Yeah.
controlling your car.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I want to empathize therapeutically for the person, the hypothetical person in that situation, because in that moment you're like, what is going on? What is all of this? So I'll attempt to answer that question in two parts. So one personally, and also in a sort of like advicey way, but take what you can, leave the rest. So for me personally, um, I I for one have come to a point where um, my my self-care practices are not these far off, tools that I just get to do, once every whenever. So for me, that's what I start with. I start almost every day with at least one practice that has continued to work for me. So for me, I practice meditation, I do affirmations, um, I contemplate. And so personally, it's come to a point now where if I find myself in a tense situation. So for me, for instance, today, the whole day I was moving, and here I am. And the emotions moving can bring up. But that being said, having and starting my day with at least even if I can't do a full maybe 20-minute meditation, even if I do a 1 minute, a 5 minute, okay, just I'm gonna breathe, breathe, breathe. It allows me to show up for those moments that are uncertain in such an open way, in such a receiving way of, okay, what am I doing now? Show me, what do I do next? What do I do next? The self-care allows me to show up with a gentleness. And so to kind of go more advicey, because I know that not everyone is going to, take up maybe meditation or the specific self-care skills that I've looked into. I think if there's one maybe takeaway I would have is to really think about, in past moments where you have been in such a situation, um, what has helped you calm down? What has helped you, at the end of the day, what has helped you let that moment go? And I ask that question because hopefully when you think about that, then hopefully the thing that allowed you to let go will become at least one thing in your self-care tool, so that you're almost doing preventative work, so that we know for sure life is uncertain. We know for sure, things could go like that. And so how do we set ourselves up
Mm,
with tools, right? Yeah.
yeah. No, thank you so much. You're right. There's a question here. How do you handle social isolation?
Yeah, especially right now. I'm thinking of everyone right now who feels that they're in this situation. Hmm. I would maybe say not to try to force. Hmm. Social. Let me think about that. Let me think about the question. So then, beauty may hopefully come out. So for me, what's coming up is how about we start with accepting that this is where we're at.
Mm.
This is where we're at. We've been. I don't want to assume where the person who asked this question is in their life right now. But I part of me wants to assume maybe as a result of COVID, but maybe not. But in thinking about, we've been in this process with COVID since March. We don't know when things will kind of reach back to whatever sense of new normal we'll have. But I think for me, what really strongly comes out is the idea of, let's first start with accepting that this is where we're at, and doing it, accepting it compassionately for yourself, because sometimes, you can accept with such a um, with such a resistance to where you are right now. But I think for me, an important step would be to say, I'm socially isolated right now, and this is where I'm at. It's neither good, it's neither bad. This is where I'm at. It's fact. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that was a bit difficult, wasn't it? Just to get, um, just to be able to do justice to that question. Okay, Irene Kakai, you are a recently graduated registered social worker. You live in Edmonton, and I appreciate we've had some challenges tonight. What I love to do is to bring you back and become your mind.
Thank you for like holding whatever internet space.
Is to bring you back and we can talk more about self-esteem. What happens when you internalize systemic oppression? Because that was what you were talking about before your internet abruptly
Mhm.
cut off. But now we've run out of time and we won't be able to get there. But we'll bring you back in maybe some other time, next week or the week after, and we can do justice to internalizing systemic oppression. So our viewers, if you're just tuning in, please share our content. It takes us time to bring this thing to you. Just share. That's the way we want you to support what we're doing. Today is Sunday, and Cassia should have been here, but she's unable to. So I'm interviewing Irene for Cassia. So Irene's come on my show. Usually on a Sunday night is Cassia's show, and Cassia deals with youth. On Tuesday, coming up for you, we have Sharing Your Stories with Tayo Nathan. On Tuesday night, we have Russell Powell, who is an intrepid. He gives us insight to the world of business and things like that. It's really good. You want to tune in for Tayo and Russell on Tuesday night. Wednesdays, we have Women at Business with Nomsa. You want to hear Nomsa because she comes with um, a different perspective, really, different tinge. This one on Friday. Sorry, I'm on Thursday. I have a show for you this Thursday, and you wanna tune in for me on Thursday, and we have the doing a late night show for us on Friday. So to our friends and well wishes, and to Irene, thank you for coming on the show. We hope to see you maybe next week again with Cassia. We'll see how that works. But thank you so much again for coming on the show. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.